November 13th, 1942, Iron Bottom Sound, off Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. In the dark, silhouettes of men climb ladders and take stations, voices low and clipped against wind and sea. On the bridge of the heavy cruiser, USS San Francisco, Rear Admiral Daniel J. Callahan squints into that black horizon, every sense stretched taut. The ship creaks as boilers strain. Searchlights lie idle like sleeping beasts. Somewhere forward, the sonar operator mutters into a headset, but the true new eye of the American fleet is buried below into a metal locker of wires and glass. The radar set, humming a cold electric whisper that the Japanese still dismiss as a curiosity. Their captains have trained on these shadows for years. The Imperial Navy's doctrine made heroes of the Black Seas. Gondo's flag flies from the cruiser Otago. Men on his bridge exchange dry jokes. They have trained for exactly this hour, to sail under cover of darkness, to shell Henderson Field, and to be gone before the Americans can even point their cameras. For months, Japanese officers had been taught to scoff at the American reliance on gadgets. Optics and training beat wires and blinking lights, one Japanese destroyer captain had told his junior officers. Radar, to many of them, was a gadget useful for search and rescue, a tool to be trusted only at long ranges and in fair weather, not the final arbiter in a close, savage night fight. In officers' messes, they would laugh quietly at the idea an electromagnetic pulse could replace an experienced helmsman's judgment. On the American side, the mood is a mix of nervous energy, new technology's raw hope, and stubborn improvisation. The Navy's surface search radars, sets designated SG and older SC types, have only recently become common on cruisers and a few destroyers. Men like Lieutenant Norman Polmar would later write about the nervous laughter aboard early radar-equipped ships, operators trying to read phosphor screens glowing like the faces of ghosts, captains unsure whether to trust a green dot or their own eyes. Combat information centers, the nerve rooms where radar plots could be plotted and fed to gunners, are works in progress. Communication procedures scratch and clutter like bad radio static. But when San Francisco's radar picks up a smudge moving at a 124, the green glow on the scope is not abstract anymore. It is a thing that points a direction and whispers numbers. Bearing, range, speed. Callahan is a man of action rather than plan. He has confidence and a bluntness that suits a small ship commander called to fight a much larger problem. He stands at the rail in a heavy wool coat, eyes reflecting starless sky and the faint phosphor glow from the radar display in the plotting room below. Around him are captains who mistrust, gunners who trust their training, and a radar operator who, half a world away from the labs that made the set, now believes in its numbers with a faith that sometimes borders on superstition. Below decks, a technician checks tubes and relays with a flat calm. Above, on the open decks, men nervously check their weapons, taste the tar and brass of the ship, and whisper the names of loved ones. At roughly the same hour, aboard Kirishima and the other ships of Kondo's force, the Japanese prepare shells and fuses meant to turn the runways of Henderson Field into churned earth. The battleship captains have trained for this maneuver down to muscle memory. How to position a formation, how to time a bombardment, how to close and withdraw through the narrow channels with the efficiency of a thrown net. Their optics are state-of-the-art. Rangefinders, spotters, the experience of tens of thousands of miles of sea time. Men peer through glass prisms, calling ranges with the clipped cadence of officers who have built their careers on the accuracy of sight. Both sides have reasons to be confident. Both sides are wrong in ways they do not yet understand. As the Japanese columns slip into Iron Bottom Sound, a fog of expectation hangs over the water. The Americans have well-placed fear. They are outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they hold Henderson Field. The Japanese have practiced contempt. They have dominated night fighting and battle doctrine. Between them sits a hum, the radar operator's little world of lights and numbers, a new way to see that the old books did not teach. It registers blips, then a line of blips, then a geometry of metal and intent drawing closer across the cold screen. It is only then, when the green dots resolve into a pattern no eye can see from the bridge, that the invisible starts to matter. The Japanese who had laughed now become the subject of a force they did not expect to negotiate. An electric eye that marks ships, measures their distance, and gives American gun crews a lead that is not guesswork but calculation. The tension snaps taut. Somewhere below, the CIC officer speaks into a transmitter, routing data to gun directors. The first orders will be given in whispers, but they will turn into the thunder of metal and flame. Callahan breathes in the night and the technology both. He does not yet know whether the green promises of the scope will be salvation or superstition. On the Japanese bridges, laughter is still a thin thing, swallowed by the dark. The sea holds its breath. November 13th, 1942, or 1:28 hours. Inside the USS Helena's Combat Information Center, the radar operator leans forward, fingers hovering just a centimeter above the glowing scope. The SG radar set murmurs with a soft electrical buzz, filling the cramped compartment with a constant reminder that the new technology is very much alive. The operator's pupils are wide, reflecting green arcs of light. He doesn't blink as a faint blip stabilizes, then another, then a line of them. Multiple contacts, bearing 320 range about 27,000 yards, he says, his voice low but steady. A petty officer scribbles the numbers onto a grease pencil board, already smudged with frantic corrections. The CIC is cramped, hot, and lit only by red lamps and the heartbeat-like glow of radar. Men try to breathe quietly, listening for the next set of numbers that could mean survival or annihilation. Back on the bridge, Captain Charles P. Cecil of Helena steps toward the talk tube, his jaw tight beneath the red glow of the overhead lamp. He listens. The numbers don't lie. The Japanese are coming. He nods to no one in particular, a reflexive gesture, then turns to his gunnery officer. They're closer than we thought. Aboard the Japanese cruiser, Atago, Admiral Kondo stands by an open bridge window, the warm ocean wind brushing his uniform collar. His lookouts sweep binoculars across the black horizon. Even with the moon barely offering light, these men are some of the best night spotters in the world, trained to detect silhouettes, muzzle flashes, even the faintest glimmer of reflection from foreign steel. But tonight they see nothing. American ships should be here, a lieutenant reports, lowering his binoculars. If they're out in force, we would see them. Kondo gives a slow nod. Perhaps they are hiding behind Savo Island. Or perhaps their courage fades with the sun. Another officer chuckles softly. Again, the confidence. Again, the underestimation. But down in the pit of Atago's fire control center, a junior gunnery officer feels a prickle of unease. Something is wrong. The ocean is too quiet. The night too empty. The Americans have shown desperation before, and desperate enemies do not simply stay away. Back on the American line, the darkness between ships feels thick enough to touch. Destroyers run with minimal lighting, barely visible shadows slicing through water. Men on deck keep their voices low. Every clank of metal feels like a betrayal to the silence. On USS O'Bannon, the radar operator calls out fresh numbers. Contacts approaching 25,000 yards, still closing fast. The operator's hands tremble, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The radar is performing flawlessly, painting a picture of metal and momentum that no human eye could claim in this blackness. The destroyer's captain murmurs, "If this is right, they're sailing straight into us." He knows the Japanese have perfected night torpedo tactics. The infamous long lance type 93s can tear a ship in half before the Americans even know they're coming. But tonight, something is different. Tonight, the Americans have the advantage, an advantage the Japanese don't even believe exists. Inside San Francisco's CIC, a young officer stares at the plotting board as range markers shrink. "Sir, they're closing at 20 knots, he says. "Admiral, they'll be inside torpedo range soon." Callahan, standing above like a carved statue, nods slowly. His gloved hand rests on the plotting table for balance as the ship rocks gently. His eyes lift toward the voice tubes that connect bridge to gunnery control. The air smells of sweat, ozone from electrical equipment, and the heavy scent of black coffee left too long in metal mugs. He wants to believe his own eyes more than a machine. But tonight his eyes show him nothing. Radar shows him everything. In the Japanese formation, a lookout aboard Kirishima blinks, shifting his gaze across the sea. He senses, without seeing, that the darkness feels heavier than it should. He swallows, grips the binoculars tighter and scans again. Nothing. Silence. Just the whisper of massive engines below deck, turning the water into a low, rumbling purr. The Japanese commanders still laugh at American radar, but the Americans have stopped laughing entirely, because now the green dots on the radar scope are no longer abstract mysteries. They are ships, they are guns, they are torpedoes, and they are moving straight toward them. November 13th, 1942, 01:42 hours. The radar picture tightens like a noose. Inside USS Helena's CIC, the operator's voice sharpens. Contacts now at 21,000 yards. Multiple formations, closing fast. A murmur ripples through the plotting team. Not fear, but the sudden recognition that the Japanese force is larger than expected. These aren't just destroyers protecting a bombardment group. This is a full strike force, cruisers, destroyers, and the battleship Kirishima herself. A fleet designed to smash Henderson Field into dust. And radar has caught every one of them. No American lookout sees a thing. No silhouette appears on the horizon. Nothing breaks the darkness but the hum of machines and the soft rustle of men shifting their stance. On USS San Francisco, Admiral Callahan receives the newest plot. Enemy range 20,000 yards. His hand tightens around the chart's edge. Callahan was never a radar evangelist, but tonight the numbers feel too precise to ignore. Steam hisses from the bridge vent. An ensign wipes sweat from his brow. The entire ship feels like a clenched jaw waiting to break open. "Signal the line," Callahan says. "Stand ready." A junior officer hesitates. "Sir, do we open fire first?" The question hangs in the cramped bridge, suspended in thick air. Doctrine favors visual confirmation. Training favors visual confirmation. Every captain in the line has been taught that radar is suggestive, not decisive. But tonight the ocean is a black wall. If they wait for visual confirmation, it might come in the form of Japanese torpedoes ripping open hulls. Callahan's voice is low but steady. "We fire when we see them, or when they see us." The implication is clear. Radar may not be trusted fully, but it gives them a clock, a timer counting down to disaster. Aboard Otago, Admiral Kondo's officers continue searching the horizon with binoculars polished to perfect clarity. Lookouts whisper range, estimates that contradict each other. The night is too still, too quiet, no engine noise, no silhouettes, no gun flashes. A lieutenant kneels by a chart and murmurs, "The Americans should have pickets here, but we've seen nothing." Kondo folds his arms behind his back. "They rely on machines," he says. "Machines cannot see in the dark." The officers nod. Confidence settles back into the room like a warm blanket. No one notices that the darkness they trust is not empty at all. It is crowded with American steel. On USS Juno, the Sullivan brothers, George, Frank, Red, Matt, and Al, stand at their stations, eyes peering into darkness, unaware of how fate is about to tighten around them. On their ship, the radar reports echo the same growing fear. Contacts detected, multiple closing. The brothers exchange looks, the kind only siblings share, before returning to their tasks. The air smells of oil, wet rope, and the faint metallic tang of ammunition. The night pulses with anticipation. On the destroyer, USS Fletcher, radar reports grow louder, more frantic. Range, 18,000 yards. 16,000. 14. Captain William M. Cole wipes his glasses and studies the glowing screen himself. A rare breach of protocol. But tonight is not a night for rules. Tonight, survival belongs to whoever believes the unbelievable first. He turns to his gunnery officer. "Tell Helena we have a firing solution." "Yes, sir." At a 1:47 hours, the invisible becomes unmistakable. Helena's radar operator suddenly straightens. They've changed course. Sir, they're turning toward us. On the plotting board, the pencils start moving faster. Confirmed. Enemy formation altering, bearing directly toward Task Force 67. The Japanese have committed to the run. They are walking blindly into the mouth of American guns. Helena's captain doesn't wait for permission. He barks, "Open fire!" His executive officer stares at him. "Sir, we don't have visual yet." Radar has them dead open. "Fire!" The order rips through the ship like a spark. Alarm shout, hatches slam. Gun crews spring into positions rehearsed 1,000 times. Seconds later, the night explodes. Boom! Boom. Helena's 6-inch guns fire the first American salvos, the first radar-directed naval gunfire in history. The shells rip through darkness, screaming invisible arcs toward enemy ships that still believe they are undetected. Aboard Otago, the first shock arrives as towering water fountains erupt around her hull. Impossibly near, impossibly accurate. A lookout screams, "Incoming fire." "Starboard side!" Kondo's officers freeze. How? They cannot see us. But the sea doesn't care how. The American radar does not miss. The Japanese laughter dies instantly, swallowed by the roar of Helena's second broadside. The night has turned, and the technology they dismissed has just found them in the dark. November 13th, 1942, 0150 hours. Helena's radar-guided salvos slam into Iron Bottom Sound like a hammer-smashing glass. The Japanese formation reels in shock. Their doctrine had promised invisibility, the silent protection of night. But radar has stripped the darkness away, revealing them like silhouettes under a spotlight they cannot see. Aboard Kirishima, water geysers rise 20 meters high, slamming onto the decks and showering the forward crew in cold spray. Officers shout orders above the roar, scrambling to identify where the American fire is coming from. "Lookouts, where are the enemy ships? I cannot see anything." No shadows, no flashes. Another shell lands close enough to rattle bulkheads. Hirishima's gunnery officer stares into the night through his rangefinder, jaw tightening as he twists knobs with growing desperation. Nothing, no profile, no mast, no smoke trail. Just darkness, darkness that fires at them. The American line erupts in staggered chaos as other ships begin firing. Fletcher opens up with her 5-inch guns, her salvos tracing orange arcs across the black sky. Portland, Atlanta, and Juneau join the barrage soon after, each relying on radar ranges relayed through crackling voice tubes. For the Americans on deck, the effects are surreal, like a firing at enemies they cannot see. The gunners train their barrels based purely on shouted numbers. Train left, bearing 340, range 8,200 yards. The ships fire blind, guided by calculations, trusting machines in place of sight. Then, like a flashbulb in a photography studio, the battle unveils itself. Tracer fire streaks through the dark from nowhere. Searchlights snap on, Japanese searchlights slicing across the night like blades. And suddenly, the ocean is alive. The Japanese, realizing the source of their peril, try to seize the advantage the moment they detect muzzle flashes from the American line. On the bridge of Otago, Admiral Kondo grips the rail as bright cones of light stab across the water. A destroyer's searchlight locks onto Atlanta, painting her in blinding white. "Open fire!" Kondo roars. Otago's forward batteries unleash their first salvo. The water between the fleets churns into a cauldron of fire, steam, and shrapnel. Aboard Atlanta, the world becomes pure chaos. Shells whistle overhead. One slams into the superstructure, another detonates near a starboard Bofors mount. Men are thrown onto steel decks slick with oil and seawater. The Sullivan brothers on Juneau see Atlanta take the hit, their ship illuminated by the Japanese searchlights sweeping the line. Gun crews scramble for defensive fire. Officers bark orders through smoke and sparks. "Target that searchlight! Fire! Fire!" Juneau's guns answer, blasting back into the glare. The Japanese destroyer, Akatsuki holding the light, is hammered relentlessly. Flames bloom from her midsection. On San Francisco, Admiral Callahan tries to impose order, but radio chatter collapses into overlapping cries. The ships are too close. The Japanese are everywhere, and radar can no longer make sense of the point-blank geometry. A voice bursts through the system. "Enemy cruiser crossing our bow." "Range?" Callahan demands. The operator hesitates. "Would be 2,000 yards. 2,000 yards. At that distance, the enemy might as well be next to them." Callahan doesn't wait. "All batteries, fire!" San Francisco unleashes a brutal broadside that catches the Japanese cruiser Haii across her superstructure. The shells tear through bridge compartments, killing officers instantly. Fires erupt across her decks. He staggers, turning helplessly into the American line. A Japanese officer screams, "We cannot maneuver. Engines responding slow." The giant ship groans as more shells rake her sides. Radar handed the Americans the first shot. Now brute force takes over. But the chaos cuts both ways. A Japanese torpedo streaks out from the destroyer, Inazuma, and Laffy, charging in close, guns blazing wildly, takes the hit along her starboard side. The explosion rocks her entire hull. Men are thrown into the sea, their screams drowned under the roar of ruptured fuel lines igniting. Still, Laffy keeps fighting. Her crew, half of them injured or bleeding, man their guns and fire point-blank into Haii's superstructure. Sailors shout as sparks shower down. It is a knife fight between ships the size of skyscrapers. Then an unthinkable moment. San Francisco's guns rake across what they believe is a Japanese silhouette. But it's Atlanta caught in the crossfire. Shells tear into her already damaged hull, killing dozens. Her decks erupt into flame. She drifts helplessly, smoke pouring upward like a wounded animal begging the heavens. Callahan stares in horror, realizing the mistake too late. The battle has lost all shape. American and Japanese ships are tangled in a deadly, swirling melee. Radar gave the advantage, but the knife fight range has stolen clarity. Aboard Atago, a junior officer shouts, "Admiral, the Americans detected us before our lookouts ever saw them." Kondo's face hardens as a shell bursts near the starboard bow. He has no answer. The truth hangs unspoken. The Americans were invisible until they chose not to be. And that truth is killing them. The night shudders with gunfire, explosions and screams. Burning oil slicks drift across the water. Ships fire within spitting distance of one another. The sky flashes again and again like a storm made of steel. One realization settles across both fleets. The age of night fighting by eye alone is over. And the Japanese admirals, those who had laughed at radar, are now fighting blind in a night they no longer own. November 13th, 1942, 02:07 hours. The air over Iron Bottom Sound is a bruise of smoke and burning fuel. Flames crawl across the water where ruptured tanks spill their contents, turning the black surface into a flickering carpet of orange. The smell, cordite, burning paint and scorched salt, clings to the throat of every man above deck. Aboard the Kirishima, the shock has turned to confusion. Officers shout contradictory bearings. Lookouts scream torpedo warnings from impossible angles. One lieutenant stares helplessly into his rangefinder. The lenses show only light and chaos. "Where are they? Where are the Americans?" the commander demands. The answer is a terrible silence, broken only by another American salvo slamming into the sea off their port bow. Near perfect in range, deadly in intent. Radar range. On the American side, the darkness dances with muzzle flashes. Fletcher fires again, her guns booming in disciplined sequence. Portland turns, battered but defiant, launching another salvo at a Japanese cruiser cutting across the American flank. Inside Helena's CIC, sweat rolls down the radar operator's neck as he calls out fresh numbers. Enemy cruiser, closing fast, range 3,000 yards and closing. Captain Cecil doesn't hesitate, fire again. Give them everything. Helena's 6-inch turrets answer with a bone-shaking roar, and the shells find their mark. Across the water, the Japanese destroyer Amatsukaze takes a crippling hit. Fire blooms along her deck. Secondary detonations walk down her length, one after another, until her crew fights just to keep her afloat. Aboard the Japanese flagship Atago, Admiral Kondo's confidence fractures. He watches his night-fighting formations break apart under American bombardment, a scenario he never believed possible. The Americans had no right to strike so accurately, so quickly, and so early in the fight. A gunnery officer shouts, "Admiral!" Their fire control is impossibly precise. They must be... He stops himself, almost unwilling to speak the word. Kondo finishes it for him. Radar. The word feels like swallowing a stone. No one laughs, no one smirks. The room is silent except for the crash of American shells. On San Francisco, Admiral Callahan navigates through the inferno. The ship is taking fire from every direction. Japanese guns that once dominated night waters now lash out in blind desperation. The bridge jolts as a shell smashes into the armored faceplate, sending men to the deck. Shards of steel ricochet through the air. Callahan pulls himself up, half deaf from the blast. "Return fire!" he shouts. San Francisco's guns roar, pouring shells into the massive silhouette of Hiei, now fully illuminated by her own burning upper decks. This time the shots hit home. A burst tears into Hiei's steering compartments. Another rips across her bridge tiers. The battleship staggers, the giant wounded, her engines bucking as the rudder jams. She tries to turn. She cannot. American radar had given the first shot. Now American resolve drives the knife deeper. On the destroyer Leffy, the crew refuses to die quietly. She's on fire. Her decks are torn. Her wounded lie wherever they fell. But her surviving gunners keep firing into Hiei at point-blank range. So close that the Americans can see Japanese officers running along her decks. One gunner grips his smoking barrel, shouting through clenched teeth, "Give it to her." Give it to her, they do. Laffy's guns hammer Hiei's bridge again, striking where her command staff huddles. The battleship's bridge explodes in a thunderous flash that evaporates the last traces of Japanese control. Admiral Abe, aboard Hiei earlier that night, has already been wounded. Now the ship drifts leaderless. This is the moment Kondo realizes the truth. Japan's mastery of darkness was built on human eyes. America's mastery of darkness is built on something else entirely. To the south, Juneau and Atlanta drift wounded, yet their guns still fire sporadic bursts as Japanese searchlights sweep the sea. Every ship fights like a cornered animal. Every radar operator calls out bearings until their voices crack. And still the Japanese fire wildly, striking friend and foe alike, their doctrine collapsing in real time. At 02:21 hours, the shriek of torpedo wakes disrupts the cacophony. A Japanese destroyer, desperate and blind, launches several long-lance torpedoes. The luminous wakes streak through the flaming water, arrows of death aimed into the unknown. Callahan spots the trails too late. Hard to port, hard. San Francisco violently lurches. A torpedo whooshes just past her bow, vanishing into the smoke. Another tracks straight toward Hiei. The Japanese battleship, wounded, burning, barely maneuvering, cannot evade. The torpedo slams into her hull with a deep, gutting boom. Direct hit on Hiei, an American lookout yells over the chaos. The battleship shudders, the flames burn brighter. Her silhouette sinks slightly lower into the waves. In that moment, as her flagship reels, as her destroyers burn, as radar-guided American fire continues with mathematical precision, the Japanese Admiralty faces a realization sharper than any shell burst. They are no longer the masters of the night. The age of optics has met the age of electrons and lost. 02:29 hours. A heavy, rolling thunder echoes across Iron Bottom Sound as another American salvo lands with terrifying accuracy. The ocean glows white for a moment before darkness swallows it again. Every explosion is a drumbeat of a new era, one the Japanese High Command is now forced to witness firsthand. Aboard the Atago, Admiral Kondo grips the railing so tightly his knuckles go bloodless. Below him, the Japanese formation, the pride of their night-fighting doctrine, is dissolving. Ships weave erratically, some aflame, others circling out of control. The order and precision that defined Japanese naval power in night battles is gone. replaced by frantic maneuvering and panicked gunnery. His operations officer, pale and trembling, forces himself to speak. "Admiral, our destroyers cannot acquire targets. They're firing on gun flashes. They cannot see the enemy." Kondo's jaw tightens. "You mean they are blind?" A hesitation. "Yes, Admiral." Kondo's gaze drifts toward the horizon, where enemy ships fire from behind the smoke. Invisible, except for the brief silhouettes of their muzzle flashes. Americans who should have been confused, disoriented, overwhelmed, are instead orchestrating a devastating storm with mechanical precision, radar-guided murder. Kondo whispers to himself, "Impossible." And yet, the battleship Hiei groans as metal buckles deep inside her hull. Fires run wild across her deck, licking at her superstructure like a starving beast. The crew fights desperately. Teams of sailors heaving hoses, smashing through bulkheads, carrying wounded through smoke-thick passageways. Then a flash. The secondary ammunition locker cooks off. The explosion blossoms upward in a towering column of sparks, blasting metal plates off their rivets. A fireball shoots skyward, turning night into a heartbeat-long imitation of dawn. From miles away, American lookouts watch the inferno rise. "That's her," one murmurs. "She's finished." But Hiei is not finished. Not yet. Her engines still churn. Her guns still bark at shadows. Her crew, bloodied but unbroken, still claws for survival. A wounded Japanese officer drags himself across the steel deck, shouting hoarsely, "Keep firing! For the Emperor, keep firing!" And for a few more minutes, the giant does. Aboard the cruiser Helena, the radar room is a frenzy of activity. New contact bearing 090, range 2,500 yards, and closing fast. Enemy or friendly? "Unknown!" Commander Hoover shouts from the bridge. "Identify before firing!" But the radar operator already knows. The pattern is unmistakable. Enemy destroyer. High speed. Then take her! Helena's guns open fire so fast and so consistently that the gunners joke the barrels must be firing themselves. Their shells rip through the darkness, finding hull steel with unerring precision. A massive explosion blooms. Another destroyer breaks apart under Helena's radar-directed wrath. And the Americans begin to understand, truly understand. We can win in the dark. We were never supposed to, but now we can. Back aboard Otago, a communications officer rushes in, breathless. "Admiral, Hiei reports severe flooding. Steering completely lost. Fire control down." Kondo closes his eyes. Abe's flagship, the spearhead of the night assault, is dying. Around him, the bridge crew waits for orders, their faces a tense mix of fear and disbelief. Japanese doctrine taught that the night belonged to them, that their optics, their training, their discipline gave them unmatched dominance after sunset. Now that doctrine burns with the ships below. Kondo forces out a single command that seals the truth of the night. All ships withdraw. The silence that follows is heavier than any gunshot. Officers stare, some look angry, some look relieved, but all understand. The Japanese Navy is leaving the battlefield it once ruled. "Sir, they're retreating!" Aboard the battered San Francisco, men lift their heads from smoking guns and shattered decking. Through breaks in the haze, they see Japanese silhouettes turning away. No one cheers, not yet. Not while their own decks run slick with blood and oil. But the truth spreads across the ship like a breath after drowning. The Japanese are giving up the night. The sea is still thick with drifting debris, burning fuel, and the corpses of sailors from both sides. Flames crackle across the surface, casting molten orange reflections on the faces of shell-shocked survivors. In the distance, the last Japanese ships slip into the darkness that once guaranteed them victory. Tonight, it betrayed them, and every American sailor knows why. Radar didn't just reveal ships. It revealed a new world. A world where the night no longer belonged to Japan. A world where machines could see farther than men. A world where the balance of power had shifted, quietly, invisibly, but irrevocably. Dawn broke slowly, hesitantly, as if unsure whether it was welcome. A thin grey band formed on the horizon, and the first weak rays of light spilled across Iron Bottom Sound. a place that had earned its name long before this battle, and would continue to earn it for years to come. The sea looked almost calm, a lie. The gentle morning glow revealed twisted steel protruding from the water, oil slicks that stretched for miles, and debris so dense it looked like it formed its own drifting continent. Life rafts bobbed between broken masts. Cargo nets floated beside lifeless bodies. Splintered planks creaked as waves nudged them against one another. It was less a battlefield now than a graveyard, and in the middle of it all, listing heavily to port, smoke still whispering from her wounds like the last breaths of a dying titan, was the battleship Hiei. The morning sun glinted across her mangled armor. Her once mighty pagoda mast, a symbol of Japanese naval power, looked like a burned skeleton against the sky. Her main batteries were silent, barrels scorched black. Her hull was a patchwork of ruptured plates, shattered compartments, and torn seams. Yet she floated, somehow impossibly she floated. Inside, hundreds of exhausted survivors huddled in darkened compartments, their faces smeared with oil, sweat, and blood. Many had fought fires for hours until their hands blistered and their voices broke. Others had manned guns until ammunition ran dry. Others simply clutched wounded comrades and prayed. A young petty officer limped across the ruined deck, calling out, "Engine room! Report!" A faint voice replied through smoke. "Flooding, rising, pumps failing. We can't hold much longer." Above them, Captain Nishida stood near the torn remains of the bridge, his uniform charred at the sleeves. His face was set in an expression carved from stone. He knew the truth. Hiei was doomed. But until she sank, she was still his ship. At 0610, a lookout aboard the destroyer Aaron Ward raised his binoculars and stiffened. "Sir, large contact off the port bow. Looks like a battleship." Word rippled instantly across the American fleet. A battleship alone, barely moving. It could only be Hiei. Within minutes, reconnaissance aircraft from Henderson Field soared overhead, engines snarling as they banked toward the crippled giant. Pilots peered down through cockpit glass at the sprawling wreck below. One muttered under his breath, "Jesus, they really hit her hard." But then, almost in disbelief, "And she's still afloat?" Radio operators transmitted the sighting to every Allied unit within range. The chase of Hiei had begun. Kondo, now miles away with his surviving ships, received the report with a heavy heart. The loss of a battleship, one of only a handful available for major operations, was unthinkable, unacceptable, but abandoning a battleship that bordered on the sacrilegious. He ordered all available aircraft from Rabaul and the Shortlands to provide air cover. Destroyers were dispatched to assist with towing attempts. Aboard Hiei, a crewman cheered faintly as friendly silhouettes appeared on the horizon. "Tug incoming! We might make it! Keep her afloat!" They lashed thick cables to her hull. Pumps roared. Sailors worked until their muscles screamed. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed as if Hiei might escape. But fate was not finished with her. The first wave of U.S. dive bombers appeared high above, like dark specks against the morning sun. Engines whined as they rolled into their attack dives, sunlight flashing off their canopies. Here they come. The Japanese crews scrambled to their stations, but most of Hiei's anti-aircraft guns were silent, wrecked by the night's fighting or short of ammunition. The first bomb struck near her stern. A second tore open her deck. A third detonated near the engineering spaces, sending a violent shudder through her entire frame. Smoke billowed upward in choking columns. Her list increased. Towing lines snapped under the strain. The destroyers trying to save her pulled away, signaling frantically. The great battleship was dying. By late afternoon, Hiei was dead in the water. Her fires burned unchecked. Her pumps were overwhelmed. Her remaining crew gathered topside, singing songs that echoed across the quieting sea. At 18:30, her captain gathered his officers. He spoke softly. "For the honor of our ship, begin evacuation." Sailors wept, others saluted. Some refused to leave until physically pulled away. The ocean rose slowly over her decks. Her bow dipped, her stern lifted, and as the sun set over Iron Bottom Sound, the battleship Hiei, veteran of the Pacific, pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, survivor of the night, slipped beneath the waves. A final burst of bubbles, a groan of twisting steel, then silence. Japan had lost a battleship. But more importantly, Japan had lost its mastery of the night. November 14th, 1942, nightfall once again. But this night was different. The Japanese Navy, once supreme in darkness, no longer trusted the very element that had defined its doctrine for decades. The aftershock of the previous night's battle rippled outward, from the bridges of destroyers still smelling of gunpowder, to the polished conference rooms of Truk, to the war rooms of Tokyo, where admirals waited for reports they already feared. And into this uneasy quiet, a truth settled like drifting ash. American radar had rewritten the rules. Silently, invisibly, irreversibly, in the dim humming glow of the radar room, sailors huddled around the screens they now regarded with something close to reverence. The circular trace glowed softly, sweeping across the display with a rhythmic pulse. Only hours earlier, those ghostly green blips had represented enemy ships, placements so precise that Helena's gunners had whispered in awe. Even now, one radar operator leaned toward the scope, running a hand across his tired face. "I still can't believe it," he murmured. "We saw him like it was daylight." His supervisor, Lieutenant Evans, cracked a rare grin. "Get used to it. Last night won't be the last time radar saves our hides." The men looked at each other with something that felt like a shared secret. Not luck, not chance. Capability. For the first time in this brutal naval campaign, American sailors felt the night tilt in their favor, and they would never give it back. Hundreds of miles away at Truk Lagoon, Admiral Kondo stepped into a briefing chamber, still reeking of cigarette smoke and urgency. Staff officers stood at attention, their faces drawn and sleepless. A map of Guadalcanal's waters spread across a long table. Red and blue markers showed ship positions from the previous night. Most of the red ones were now clustered over a single note scribbled in charcoal. Shi-Yai, lost. A staff officer cleared his throat. "Sir, intelligence suggests the Americans used shipboard radar to track our approach, even in full darkness." Kondo's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Our lookout saw nothing, not even silhouettes. "That is precisely the point, sir." Silence thickened. Japanese doctrine had long held that superior optics, meticulous training, and superb night discipline made their navy untouchable after sunset. No amount of American innovation, they believed, could offset that advantage. But innovation had not compensated, it had replaced. And as the stunned officers reviewed the loss reports, a single sentence hung over the table like a storm cloud. "The Americans saw us before we saw them." The technology wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, like the booming guns or the blazing torpedoes that shaped naval warfare. It didn't roar or thunder, it hummed quietly, reliably, consistently. An operator turned a dial, a blip appeared. A bearing was called out, a captain issued a command. A turret swung, and death followed. Radar stitched the fragmented chaos of night battles into something coordinated, almost choreographed. It offered range beyond sight, tracking beyond hearing, accuracy beyond human reflex, coordination beyond guesswork. It was the closest thing to cheating war had ever seen. Within weeks, word filtered through the Imperial Japanese Navy, "We lost because we could not see them." American ships fire without making silhouette. Their guns track in total darkness. Radar, radar, radar. Each retelling carried more weight. What had been dismissed as an overrated novelty was now treated like sorcery. Pilots feared unseen fighters intercepting them in clouds. Destroyer captains dreaded shapes that appeared on radar before they could be spotted by eye. Admirals rethought battle plans that had relied on the cloak of night. And in Washington, American strategists realized something astonishing. Their ships had won not by accident, but by technological inevitability. The Battle of Guadalcanal did more than decide control of an island. It declared that the world had entered a new age, one where circuits, antennas, and cathode screens shaped the outcomes of engagements once ruled by optics and instinct. Aboard every American cruiser and battleship, radar teams refined their scans. Engineers optimized range resolution. Captains rewrote battle doctrines. The night no longer belonged to the boldest. It belonged to the best prepared. And with every passing month, Japanese officers found themselves fighting not only American ships, but the future. A future they had laughed at. A future now sweeping them from the Pacific, one blip at a time. Early 1943, Central Pacific Headquarters, Tokyo. Rain hammered against the tall windows of the Naval General Staff building, each drop tapping like an impatient reminder of time slipping away. Inside, a long, polished table reflected the grim faces of senior officers. Their uniforms were immaculate, but their confidence was cracked. A rear admiral tapped a pointer against a map smothered in red X marks. Guadalcanal, Tassafaranga, the slot. Our destroyers are bleeding out. Our cruisers are crippled. Our night tactics are failing. Another officer muttered almost to himself, failing, they are being dismantled. The tension in the room tightened like a rope. For years, the Imperial Japanese Navy had cultivated the finest night fighters in the world. Their destroyers carried the deadly Type 93 Long Lance torpedoes. Their optics could spot silhouettes miles away with breathtaking clarity. Their crews drilled night maneuvers until muscle memory replaced thought. But now the Americans were firing through darkness as if it were midday, and none of Japan's strengths mattered. The waters north of Guadalcanal, the slot, had become a nightly battleground. Fast transports, destroyer runs, cruiser clashes, every night brought another exchange of torpedoes and shell fire. But in the new year, something changed. American ships entered the slot at night with a confidence that spooked even their most experienced officers. Aboard the destroyer Fletcher, Captain Frank Walker watched the radar screen with a strategist's gleam. There they are, 2 minutes to contact. The contacts appeared as steady-moving dots, no guesswork, no scanning the darkness, no frantic shouts from lookouts. Walker ordered, set torpedo run. Prepare guns, his XO blinked. They don't even know we're here yet, sir. Walker smirked. That's the idea. Moments later, Fletcher's torpedoes streaked across the water. Seconds after impact, the night erupted in fire. The Japanese destroyer Kawakaze rolled violently from the blast, her hull torn open. Her lookouts had never seen the enemy ships, not even a silhouette. One of the surviving Japanese sailors later wrote in his diary, "The Americans struck as ghosts. We saw nothing, only explosions." The slot had transformed from Japan's hunting ground into a graveyard for its finest ships. Back in Tokyo, engineers scrambled through reports, trying to match what radar could do. But reality was unforgiving. Japan had invested heavily in optics, torpedoes, and night training. America had invested heavily in electronics, research labs, and industrial production. The Japanese Navy did possess radar, but their versions were unreliable, late, and far fewer in number. Admiral Ugaki slammed a folder shut during one meeting, exclaiming, "Optics cannot defeat electricity." Yet their manufacturing capacity couldn't keep up. Factories lacked materials, technicians lacked training. Designs were rushed, flawed, or obsolete by deployment. Japan was trying to outrun a technological avalanche. By mid-1943, nearly every significant U.S. warship carried radar. Not just the big cruisers and battleships, but destroyers, escorts, and even PT boats. And for the first time in naval warfare, a new kind of commander emerged, the radar captain. Men like Captain Ali Burke, who used radar like a conductor's baton, guiding entire squadrons through pitch darkness with precision previously unimaginable. On one operation, Burke turned to his officers as the radar screens glowed. "Gentlemen, tonight we fight with information, not eyesight." His destroyers moved in formation so tight and so coordinated that Japanese observers were convinced American ships had developed some supernatural ability to navigate by instinct. In reality, the instinct was a rotating antenna feeding bearings into a combat information center. And every battle ended the same way: American hits. Japanese confusion. Torpedoes fired at empty water. Gun flashes giving away their positions. Ships dying before they ever saw the muzzle that killed them. Word spread across the fleet. A petty officer aboard the cruiser Sendai whispered to a comrade, "They see us before the battle even begins." A destroyer captain posted in Rabaul wrote in his log, "We go out knowing our enemy is invisible. We return, if lucky, in smoke and splinters." Night training, once a point of pride, now felt like suicide drills. By late 1943, with the Central Solomons campaign underway, the entire Japanese naval strategy was collapsing around this new reality. Their edge in night combat was gone. Their surprise tactics were obsolete. Their destroyer superiority was neutralized. Their morale was brittle. Their admirals were shaken. Radar had done more than win a battle. It had shattered a doctrine, broken an empire's confidence, and sent a shockwave through every naval engagement that followed. The war had turned quietly, electronically. Mid-1943, Pacific Ocean, aboard USS Washington. The battleship cut through the night at 27 knots, her bow slicing a clean divide through rolling waves. Above, a full canopy of stars glittered. Once this sky had been Japan's armor. Their officers had read moonlight, cloud cover, and shadow angles with near mystical precision. Now, the night sky meant almost nothing. Radar screens glowed inside Washington, showing contacts miles farther than the human eye could ever detect. Sailors monitored bearings with methodical calm, every sweep of the antenna sending data directly to fire control. A junior officer glanced at the screen and marveled. "It's like seeing through the world itself." His chief simply replied, "Get used to it. This is the new normal." The American fleet had become nocturnal in a way the Japanese had never imagined. In Tokyo, memos began circulating through the Naval Ministry. Reports from engineers were blunt. U.S. radar sets were being produced by the thousand. Bombers now carried reliable airborne radar. Escort carriers fielded radar-equipped fighters. Submarines could track targets underwater and in darkness. Destroyers had radar so precise they were engaging torpedo boats at ranges once considered absurd. Admiral Yamamoto, before his death, had warned his colleagues that America's industrial and scientific capacity would eventually overwhelm Japan. Now his warning had materialized into machinery. Every month, U.S. production ramped higher. Every month, new ships departed American shipyards equipped with the latest electronic suites. And every month, Japan's ability to adapt shrank. Radar didn't just guide ships. It guided airstrikes, intercepts, bombing runs, and ambushes. In the skies of the Solomons, U.S. fighters equipped with the new SCR-540 airborne radar intercepted Japanese bombers at night. Intercepts previously thought impossible. In June 1943, a Japanese bomber crew flying toward New Georgia spotted a moving shadow just moments before tracers tore through their fuselage. The tail gunner screamed, "Where did they come from?" There was nothing, but there had been something. Hidden in the darkness, guided by an invisible electronic beam, American radar-equipped night fighters had followed them like wolves trailing a wounded deer. The bomber spiraled into the jungle below, the crew never understanding how they were found. November 2nd, 1943, a night shrouded in thick overcast clouds, perfect conditions for a Japanese ambush. At least in the old war. But this was the new war. Aboard the U.S. cruiser Montpellier, Admiral Merrill spoke calmly to his staff as radar contacts appeared. Enemy column approaching, 7, maybe 8 ships. The Americans formed up instantly. No confusion, no searching, no hesitation. Radar plotted. Enemy distance, speed, formation, angle of approach. Everything a commander could possibly want. When the Japanese admiral prepared to execute his surprise maneuver, flares suddenly burst overhead. American flares, revealing his fleet at the worst possible moment. Within seconds, cruisers opened fire with radar-directed salvos, so accurate they might as well have been point blank. The sea erupted. The Japanese commander staggered as the flagship Sendai was hammered, her hull shredded by shells from guns that shouldn't have been able to see anything. Japan had attempted to recreate its old night magic, but the spell was broken. Late 1943, Rabaul. Japanese technicians hunched over disassembled radar sets, wires tubes, components manuals. But every attempt to match American performance failed. Their radars, burned out under humidity, lost contact at short range, performed poorly against aircraft, couldn't track multiple targets, struggled to hold calibration. A frustrated officer snapped, slamming his fist into a workbench. "We do not need better men. We need better machines." It was a realization that echoed across the fleet. Japan's warrior spirit was intact. Their courage was unquestioned. Their seamanship was sublime. But courage could not see through darkness. Training could not compete with electrons. Bravery could not outthink a machine. And without radar, Japan was fighting blind. By 1944, the US Navy had perfected the integration of radar with combat information centers, CICs, anti-air screens, night fighter direction, carrier group coordination, surface action tactics, artillery radar ranging. Japan's naval command watched in despair as American destroyers ambushed their convoys at will. US cruisers destroyed Japanese squadrons before they could see anything but tracer fire. Radar-guided fighters decimated incoming raids. Carrier groups maneuvered with surgical coordination. Submarines used radar to intercept shipping routes once thought safe. The technological balance had flipped irreversibly. And it had all begun with laughter. In 1941, in a Tokyo conference room, senior officers had dismissed reports of American radar as primitive and unreliable. They laughed. In 1942, aboard the bridge of Hiei, that laughter died in fire and steel. By 1943, their night campaigns collapsed. By 1944, the US Navy owned the darkness completely. And by 1945, Japan's once formidable surface fleet would be a memory, sunk, scattered, or scuttled, often detected long before a Japanese lookout ever spotted a silhouette. Radar had not just found ships. It had found the weakness in an empire's doctrine and exploited it without mercy. The sea was still smoldering when the first streaks of gray broke across the eastern horizon. The smoke from burning cruisers drifted low, clinging to the waves like a final reminder of the chaos that had played out through the night. And in that cold early light, the survivors, American and Japanese alike, finally saw the scale of what had happened. Aboard the USS Washington, exhausted sailors leaned against bulkheads, their faces streaked with sweat, grime, and powder. The ship's decks were littered with shell casings still warm to the touch. Radar operators, their eyes bloodshot after hours glued to glowing screens, pushed back from their consoles to stretch stiff limbs. They were heroes, though none of them felt like it. They had simply done their jobs, watched the ghosts on the screen materialize into ships, called out bearings, and trusted that the gunners and officers would translate those blips into survival. On the other side of Iron Bottom Sound, the sun revealed a funeral procession of oil slicks and drifting debris. What had once been Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo's confident task force was now scattered, limping or sunk. The pride of the Japanese night fighting doctrine, precision optical training, years of surface combat preparation, and unmatched discipline had collided with something they had dismissed as gimmickry. American radar, and it had not been luck. It had been detection, direction, coordination, and inevitability. Aboard the Japanese cruiser Nachi, officers stood in silence around a weather-worn chart table. Kondo, who hours earlier believed he held every advantage, now stared at reports that made no sense to him. How had the Americans known exactly where his ships were before visual contact? How had they maneuvered with such precision in darkness thicker than ink? How had a battleship he never even saw fired salvos that found their targets with near-perfect accuracy? His staff tried to offer conventional explanations, chance, scouting mistakes, some fluke of conditions. But the truth refused to hide any longer. American ships had seen in the dark. As Kondo's aides gathered fragments of shattered binoculars and smoke-stained rangefinders, the Admiral walked to the battered rail of his ship. He watched the sunrise with a hollow expression. The night battles that Japan once dominated, Tsushima, The early Solomon skirmishes, even the bloody victory at Savo Island, were done. The Americans had rewritten the rules, and somewhere in the early morning calm, a faint whisper spread through the fleet's ranks, spoken with disbelief, frustration, or fear, depending on who said it. The Americans have a machine that can see ships in the dark. Back aboard the USS Washington, Admiral Lee allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He knew the victory belonged not only to the firepower of a battleship or the courage of the men aboard it, but to the silent, almost invisible work done deep inside the ship. Radar, still new, still imperfect, had changed everything. Without it, the night would have belonged to the Japanese. Instead, the night had become their undoing. The battle was over, but the consequences were only beginning. Tokyo received the news in fragments, each dispatch more troubling than the last. And when the full picture became clear, senior commanders, once openly dismissive of American electronics, met in somber emergency councils. They could train men to fight, they could build ships, but they could not duplicate American radar. Not quickly enough, not in the middle of a war that was already slipping away. The laughter, the mockery, the casual dismissal of US electrical toys had died on the waters of Guadalcanal. Because on that night, November 14th, 1942, American radar had not just tracked a fleet. It had changed the course of the Pacific War.